We are live. Hello.
Hey.
Look at all the candidates. Let me post those links into the thing.
Hey, yeah, we'll just do like a quick
Hello. Is this
Welcome to my YouTube channel.
Is this an Instagram live?
It's like a YouTube live.
Disappointing.
It's like Kylie when her friend's gone. Someone's like film it for her.
This is going on our YouTube channel. You should say stuff that's like
If
say
elected, I will get
Revive
rid of the YouTube channel.
Here's the link.
Please.
Who uses YouTube anymore?
nice.
I watch
I'm aiding in this.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but that's what I mean. It's like post on YouTube now.
Can you?
Yes! I was actually just thinking about that.
It's like,
Are you
I
an
don't even know.
aspiring
Okay.
influencer?
Great.
Let's do that.
I was about to. You and one follower.
Wow! Oh my god!
yeah, I literally don't have it. I contacted Instagram. I was like,
Landsberg
what
should
the
have
fuck
put
is
one for that
this?
year. I'm still salty.
I told them that it's unfair and undemocratic.
Undemocratic.
To do what?
The Instagram doesn't allow me to post questions on my Instagram.
Why not? How?
I don't know. I sent them a request and I told them that it was anti-democratic that all my contenders
Wait, how many
could have
followers do
it,
you
but I
have?
don't. What?
How many followers do you have?
Like 1,000?
So that's enough.
Or like 900?
I think who has the most followers? I think on the lid it's Tyler. Right now.
No, I think it's Christina.
Christina, no, Tyler got 5 ahead of Christina last time I checked.
No.
Is there a competition?
Christina's at 1479. Tyler's at almost 2,000.
Oh, I have 889.
Wow.
I'm at like 400, but I also.
Tyler is
I know.
got so many likes.
So the thing with
I try
Tyler,
so
Okay,
hard on
okay, we should-
Instagram.
Okay, all right.
Everybody, shut up.
Hey,
AUC.
so hey everyone, welcome to the Core Exec Debate. If you're joining us online, hello. We're gonna start with the land acknowledgement statement.
Yeah, all right. Okay. All right. We would like to acknowledge the sacred land on which the University of Toronto operates. It has been a site of human activity for over 15,000 years. This land belonged to the Wyandot people in pre-colonial times before changing hands several times from the Haudenosaunee, the Neutral, the Wyandot Teonotati, and finally ending with the settling of the Anishinaabe Mississaugas. The territory consists of ceded land covered under the Toronto Treaty 13 of the Upper Canada Land Surrenders and the Williams Treaties, as well as unceded land that continues to be contested. Today, Toronto is home to many Aboriginal peoples, including First Nations status Indians, non-status Indians, as well as Métis and Inuit peoples from across the continent. We can never work to end systemic and institutional violence if we do not center the narrative of Aboriginal peoples and our collective decision-making for social justice and equity. As settlers on this territory, we directly benefit from a colonial culture that has overseen the genocide, systemic oppression, and exploitation of Aboriginal peoples. In order to engage in resistance and solidarity against the injustices inflicted on the Aboriginal people of this land, it is imperative we constantly engage in acts of awareness and decolonization. We would also like to pay our respects to Aboriginal leaders and traditional teachers, both past and present, and to any of those who may be with us here today, physically, emotionally, and spiritually.
One more person.
Us, our 5 closest friends,
can we do like
and
that?
3 followers on there.
How do?
All right.
I'm just wondering how many people are on.
It's okay. They'll watch
Okay.
it later.
So, I think just sort of to give you like a good minute to start out each, I think the first question we're going to ask is, who are you and why are you applying for your respective position? Thomas, you want to start out?
Oh, sure. All right. I am Thomas Kunder. I'm a 3rd-year student studying biochemistry. I am running to be VP of the Lit because, well, I've been on this council for 3 years, and I've gained a lot of experience, and I have a really big passion. That was a weird way to say that. I have a lot of passion for the UC community, and I really want to take this role of VP and really make lasting change of the way we operate as Lit and the way we could, interact with the UC student body. That's it. That's it.
Okay, perfect. Hi everyone and followers online. I'm Noah. I'm a 3rd-ish year student. I currently am the finance commissioner this year, and I'm running for re-election. The reason that I wanted to run for re-election is I wanted to build off the success of this year and the changes that we made, and hopefully steer this ship in the right direction next year in terms of finances. As everyone knows, we will have a lot of financial difficulties next year, and I think that that will require a bit of experience with lit finances to kind of redirect us and kind of reset how the lit will operate going forward under this new model until things change. Yeah, that's it.
Hi, my name is Danielle. I am a third-year student studying urban planning and political science, and I'm running to be your president of the 2019-2020 council. I have so much passion for the UC Lit. I've been on it since my very first year, and I felt like I've really grown throughout my time, and I've learned a lot and gained the necessary skills to become your president. Next year, like Noah said, we will be facing some challenges with the possible proposed changes made by the Ontario government. So I want to definitely help UC constituents, making sure that they are knowledgeable about all of this going on. Yeah, and I also want to make sure that I worked a lot this year with our ancillaries, so I want to continue supporting them as president.
Great. So first real question, if you take a look around you, you'll notice all three of you are uncontested. Why do you think this is, and like, how do you feel about it? And why would you still be the correct choice even if you were contested? Thomas?
All right, so yes, we are all currently uncontested, and I think that has a lot to do with, one, the roles that we are running for. They are time committed, they are demanding, they expect a lot out of you, and we're all students and we all don't have that much time. Another part is, I think, a fundamental lack of genuine engagement with the UC community, and people, a vast majority of the UC community doesn't care about the lit. Here we are, I count 6 people at this core exec debate, the 0 people streaming right now, probably. If you are there, hello. But this is a big issue that the lit has always faced and continues to face to this day. And that's a huge issue, and that's something I really want to hopefully try to address as VP.
I would definitely agree with that sentiment in terms of the lit's closed off in terms of reaching out to the community.
Bye, Aster.
Bye. I guess just to recenter there, like so many UC students some don't know what the lit is. Some don't know that they are technically a member of the society, which is the UC Lit, and many more don't even know what we do. So I think that's like a very large problem in terms of how we engage with our constituents and something that needs to change going forward. But I also agree that the 3 positions that we're running for are positions that do have a level of difficulty and do require a level of understanding of how the college operates. So there is also a lack of internal candidates that are coming up through the lit. There's someone at the door, can someone let them in? And I think the other thing as well with finance is some people, it's very much a position that has been people running who have been deputies, and there's kind of that internal movement because there is so much like intricacies to it, which I don't think necessarily needs to happen, and that's why I'd like to make some changes next year to help make commission members and just general members of the society more aware of how the finances work, so that anybody could technically, with finance experience, not necessarily, could run for finance.
Yeah, I agree with all the points made so far. Just to add on, I think there is almost a stigma that comes with running for core exec positions. I feel like a lot of people believe that they have to have the necessary experience on the lit to run for one of these experiences. But I think the truth is, as long as you have the management skills or the financial skills to really bring to the table, you definitely have an opportunity that's in your hands that you could take. And I think this also has to do with our engagement. Every year we strive to engage UC students, but there's always a barrier for us reaching them. So building off of both of your points, I think that's one goal that we should definitely promote with upcoming elections, is that you may not have to have 3 years of UC Lit experience, but you can come in and just demonstrate to us that you would be a worthy leader within the UC community.
Great. So this next question is just for the presidential candidate. While it's lovely to see you've included bringing back corn coming as part of your platform, its success was largely due to collaboration between colleges and faculties, as well as the Varsity Blues, facilitated through the SGRT, the St. George Roundtable. As a sitting member of SGRT, how would you plan to interact with other college/faculty student societies?
Great question. Thank you, Paul. So I have had experience working with other college societies, especially with the proposed changes made by the government. I've met with other student leaders to discuss how we will plan to outreach to students. And from these experiences, I've learned that it is difficult to connect with a large group of people, which is why SGRT meetings, UTSU meetings, and meeting with the Varsity Blues would be a priority for me over the summer. I would want to make sure that at SGRT meetings, that collaboration is a main component of what we are discussing. I think student groups have to support each other and work together. So definitely, I'm not sure how many SGRT meetings are had for the summer, but I want to encourage more, to speak to the chair, see if we could have one a month, especially if this is something that everybody on the SGRT would be up to do. I would also want to collaborate with the UTSU as well. So adding in their collaboration, especially because they have such a larger outreach to the U of T community, I would do this through the UC directors and have them talk to the execs and have the UC directors more involved in the Corn Coming collaboration. And then finally with the Varsity Blues, I know actually there's one of our candidates who's on the Varsity Blues, and I would like to reach out to her, see if she could get me in connection and seeing how we can collaborate and make sure that the date works, that the times work, that we have the cheerleaders on and everything set. So yeah, it definitely would be something that takes a lot of initiative, and I believe I have the skills where I could bring that forward and succeed in it.
Great. So the next question is going to the vice presidential candidate. As vice president, how would you take action against members of council who consistently do not show up to meetings, retreats, or otherwise mandatory events?
Well, I think obviously the best way is to put up some sort of just system with a lot of understanding there. You know, some sort of, you know, you miss so many meetings, we chat with you and see what's going on with you. You miss so many meetings, after that, you may or may not be removed from the list. But at that point, because there has to be a certain amount of accountability for every member of the council, we're all not just running for these positions, but by getting them, that's an opportunity we're taking away from other students getting engaged. And that's something we all have to take seriously, or else why are we running? But at the same time, like obviously there's a level of understanding with you're sick, you have work last minute and you can't get out of it. There's a lot of situations where we obviously have to understand, but at the same time, there has to be a middle ground between empathy and also just making sure you're accountable as a student and as a representative.
Great. So this next question, take a guess. It's for the finance candidate. So there are obviously some changes undergoing with the provincial government, and they will have a direct effect on the lit. What strategies would you use to address and adapt to the changes being made?
So the changes that are being made, there's a lot of ambiguity in terms of how the lit will operate. So I think it's just in the next few months, especially during the summer months and into September, it's kind of keeping our eyes open to what those changes are, and trying to understand, like we still don't have a lot of questions in terms of how our funding will be affected, how many students will opt in / opt out, which is also another question. So I think keeping on top of that and also increasing communication with the other finance commissioners, vice presidents, or higher positions at other colleges. So I'd actually like to, whoever is elected for VP, or sorry, for president, I'd like to work with them to start a SGRT kind of like spin-off in a sense, not necessarily something formal, but something where the finance executives of the different colleges could then meet up to discuss like some of the challenges and some of the strategies that they're implementing, moving forward with the cuts, and kind of hear what they've had success with or what they're planning on doing, so we can kind of present a united force. I think it is well in terms of that. I think there needs to be a general level of understanding during the summer budgeting period that money will be tight, like probably one of the tightest years ever, because we will not know how many people will be opting in or out for funding in September. So basically, with that period, we'll really have to increase our contingency throughout the summer just to adjust for that, and funding will be affected. But one of the ways that I proposed in my platform to kind of reprioritize where funding will go is to kind of change and simplify the budgeting process at the LIT. So it would be an overall budget for each commission, and then that would allow more autonomy and more collaboration with regular society members who are on commissions to join a commission and actually have an impact on where that budget's being spent. I don't think it's fair that one person decides what events are happening for the entire semester or year. I think it would be really great if we could say, hey, this commission has $4,000, and then at those meetings, everyone can discuss ways and how they would like to spend that money. And I think that would be a really democratic way of doing it. And it would be a very simplistic way of doing our budgeting. So that's one way that I would like to change the budgeting process, which would also have an impact on how our funding is spent. So we won't go into the budgeting period planning the exact same events that we planned last year, because that just won't be feasible in terms of finances and spending it.
Okay, sort of leading off from that question, we have a question from the audience. If you'd like to go ahead, Miranda.
Do I say my name?
Sure, yeah. Who are you?
I am Miranda Desbiens. I am the current but leaving University and Academic Affairs Commissioner of this year's council. This leads well with what was just asked. However, this is addressed to any of the candidates I want to answer, not one specifically. So, like we've just discussed, the risk of budget restrictions has been a heavy topic on this campaign season. However, little has been said about defining constituents. Currently, anyone enrolled at UC is counted as a constituent because they pay the ancillary fees. How do you plan to ensure that our constituency remains all UC students, regardless of who pays council fees, to ensure that the lit events do not become solely accessible by paying these fees?
We can start from Danielle's end.
Cool. So that's a great question, because that's a very philosophical take on what's going to happen with the policies. Well, it's true. It's the way that's happened for the last since 1854 is that you pay the fees. You're a member of society. Everyone enrolled at UC pays the fees. They're all part of the UC Lit. So when that option is taken away from us, where not everyone at UC is a constituent, I think it's important for us not to think that way. I think we still have to see every UC student as our constituent, because we are the representatives of the UC body. And ways that I plan on addressing this is because we have a much smaller fee than a lot of the other colleges at U of T, working with the registrar's office and seeing if they could offer bursaries for students who can't pay that $35, but are willing to apply to a bursary where they could get that $35 paid for throughout the year. They could still attend our events. Another thing that I was brainstorming, not sure if it's possible, is seeing if this depends again on what the restrictions are once the actual details are released, is seeing if people can join on later on at the year. So if we really work on outreach from May all the way to December, and then December we have a midpoint join in, maybe we could get more students in on board. But my overall point is we still have to make sure that we are not excluding anyone who can't financially afford to be on the UC Lit. I think it's our job as representatives that we have to work to accommodate these students and we have to work to help them. So I believe there are solutions. Once the details are released, I promise to go full steam ahead, talk with the other colleges, talk with U of T admin and the registrar's office to make sure that we're helping out these students the best that we can.
I'd just like to hop in on that because while I agree with everything Danielle said, there's also another factor of a lot of the people who will opt out of our student fees are the people who really just don't care about the UC Lit. The people who don't see a point in funding us because we don't do anything that they're interested, that they want to be engaged with, or that they feel included with. So I think really in our outreach and in our engagement with students, we really need to make a clear focus that the UC Lit and its events are for everyone. And that's always how it's going to be. Everyone at UC, regardless of whether they pay an opt-in fee or not, is a part of this community, is part of what we do, and they're who we do this for.
I'd like to take a little bit of a different turn on that. I'm not willing to say right away whether or not I would want students to be excluded from certain events because they opted out, because I think that we really don't know what the composition of people opting out will be. But I think when it comes down to it, and a lot of people, even including an admin, have made this hypothesis that a lot of the people that are going to be opting out are going to be potentially fourth-year students who are focusing on school, don't want to be coming to events, or think they don't want to be coming to events. So the thing is, this tactic that the Ford government's doing is a classic union busting tactic that's used in workplaces as well. Everyone gets the same benefit, but they don't have to pay the fee. So after a while, nobody pays the fee because they don't see the need of paying for it if it's already going to be happening. And then the union dies. So I think if we just allow, for certain events that we subsidize highly, very highly, we do have a few events where we subsidize the majority of it. I think we do need to look at whether or not there's a financial option that we can provide students that truly cannot afford to pay the UC Lit fees, or ones that just don't want to pay it and then decide later on, hey, I want to go to this event. I am conflicted in that because I don't think that people should have it both ways, but I do think that we definitely need to advocate for our students who cannot truly pay for the fee. So I think having bursaries is an effective strategy for that, but we do need to understand that if we continue on that path, people won't see the need in future years to pay the fee because, oh, I paid it last year, but this person didn't pay it, so I'm not going to pay it. And then we slowly trend downwards in finances forever or at least until Ford's voted out. But yeah, that's just playing devil's advocate on that. I think we need to take a little bit more of a nuanced approach to it because there will be people who will try to mooch off of it. Not saying that everyone would, but there are people who might or may not realize that they are truly, they may opt out of everything, but not realize what services are provided, like Fireball.
Okay. So all of you are going into upper years. The question here is, how would you balance making council accessible to newer and younger members while also maintaining the traditions that older council members appreciate?
Do you mind just defining what traditions older council members appreciate?
It could be anything from specific events that might happen every year to something like the table clapping we do.
Well, I think to a certain extent, specific events that we run aren't necessarily just up to the core exec. Mm-hmm. That is something that commissioners plan and decide between that commission members who are just general UC students put input in and then are a part of that decision. But I think as always, we will try to be as open and accessible to every new member who comes in, just as we always are. And I think the real tradition is that we are accessible to new people. Older UC Lit members that we're like that we welcome all with open arms, or try to, and that we, I don't know what specific tradition we're kind of referring to here. I'm just confused by the question a little.
Okay. I guess I was also just kind of confused by the question, but in terms of, I just wanted to say in terms of traditions, I am not a huge fan of them. I think we should really pay respect to history, but I don't think that we should necessarily just blindly follow traditions. But I think taking a look at like if they do provide value to the lit and whether or not they do serve a purpose. But I think for certain things, I think it's really like making sure that when new members of council are voted in or elected, that sitting down with them, really making sure that they know some of the ins and outs and like a very like simple to understand context of like explaining parts of the Constitution prior to meetings. So it's not kind of, you get into the meetings and you're trying to pick it up as we go along. I think having that kind of preparatory thing before meetings and before people are actually like thrown into the mix would be a good way to help people get adjusted to how the lit operates and kind of understand it so they don't like spend half the time on the lit trying to figure out what the lit does or how we operate.
Yeah, I'll hop on in here. I think something that's very important to do, not just with new members, but with all members, is having those initial one-on-one meetings right at the beginning of, right after the JCM. So right after the joint council meeting is over, we move into one-on-ones with all members and we sort of get an idea of the level of knowledge they have on the lit, and from there really work to support them because I think that as our role as core exec is one of our main jobs. One thing that I did last year as vice president a lot was once new members started coming to council, in the email blurbs for agendas, I would explain some of the terms that we use in our documents. So motion, discussion item, seconded, what all those meant, because if you're not used to student government, that jargony terminology is very out of this world. So it's just explaining it over a simple text message could be very easy and people could get it. And I find also throughout meetings themselves, before jumping into a motion, especially during those first initial meetings, sort of taking the time to explain what's going on. And this year we had an amazing speaker who did that. So I hope to continue that on and make sure that throughout the meetings themselves, newer members are getting accustomed to how the lit operates.
Go for it.
It's just like the discussion, like I've kind of realized a few things that I think it would be valuable. I kind of touched upon it, but really formalizing a like new member orientation. Like people aren't elected to the legislature or parliament and they're not expected to know what to do or go to the first session and just do it. They have like sessions where they sit down and they're learning how to do it. So I think core exec could kind of work together on providing that, building it, and maybe making it a tradition going forward. Another thing as well, I really agree with Danielle's point about one-on-ones, and I just like to reiterate that core exec really should provide a role as a coach to everyone on council, helping them make goals and keeping them accountable to those goals and asking how core exec can help them in reaching those goals that kind of all take an aim to a broader council goal. It's kind of like it all comes together for a common purpose. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay, I think we can take one from the audience again. Tyler, go ahead.
Not all at once.
Yeah, so I have a few, but we'll spread it out.
Do you want to say who you are first?
So I'm Tyler. I am Tyler Riches. I am one of this year's first year representatives and University College directors on the UTSU. And the first question I will ask is for our lovely president. So you kind of touched on it.
Candidate.
Sorry,
Not
yes.
president.
Oh my God. Our presidential candidate. So you kind of touched upon it in your opening statement, but how exactly would you ensure that meaningful connections are made to the UTSU and that there's a good, healthy working relationship between both like the UC directors and the lit and also like the UTSU overall as an organization and the lit?
Yeah, of course, that's a great question. So one of the things that I stated in my platform is I want to have meetings with the UC directors after their monthly meetings with the UTSU, just because reports are often very short and we don't often, core exec doesn't know what happens throughout an entire meeting, even just little things that may be useful information to us, but is not useful for all of council to know or to put into your report. Hi.
Welcome to the core exec debate.
Yes.
Yes, and watch the debate.
But yeah, I want to have core exec plus UC director meetings after your monthly meetings. And I also want to go to a lot of UTSU meetings this year, especially because the president is an acting member on the UTSU. So I want to go and witness it for myself, just so then I'm an extra support system for the UC directors as well. If they ever need something backed up or explained at a council meeting, I could be there to support them. Definitely, I want to encourage more UTSU collaborations this year, especially because the UTSU has more of an advocacy background that I think the UC Lit could definitely benefit from and take into definitely incorporate with their Equity and Outreach Commission. So meeting with the executive for equity on the UTSU and having meetings with our Equity and Outreach Commissioner, I think we can learn a lot from those types of collaborations too.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay. So this march is no different from most other UC Lit marches, with a ton of events sort of smashed together. How would you work to better ensure more timely planning from commissioners to better spread events across the year? As well, there's a second part to this question. Since a lot of events this month are ticketed, we are unfairly expecting UC students to shell out ticket money for many of these at once, when many financial situations are already precarious and could be more so with the cuts to OSAP. Aside from the planning aspect, how would you work to help lessen the financial burden on these students who may want to attend events? You can ask me to repeat either two, please. No, go ahead.
I feel like I'm still have been going first too many times.
I felt like I was going first, right?
Yeah,
Okay, we're all feeling it, so I'll just go first. So that's a very good question. This always happens annually with the Lit. People are elected into their positions. They plan out the year. They get really excited for all the events they want to do. Then school comes up and things get pushed back and pushed back. People forget that they plan to do events and budgeted for them. And then we end up in usually it's just March. We end up in March. And then all of a sudden there's 89 Lit events, 3 per minute. It's a lot. And that's an issue to begin with. And also, not just an issue time-wise for students. No one has time to go to this many events in such little time, especially with final exams just around the corner. But yes, there is a whole thing with finances as well. If we are asking people to attend 8 different events and each one has $10, that's very easily an $80 expense right there for anyone who would like to attend all of our events. And while I understand that some events that we have, we do ask for, we do sell tickets for and charge $5 or $10, that's fine when those are few and far between. When we effectively spread those out throughout the year so that they don't become financial burdens on students. So as VP, I would very much want to address that, make it so that we just really are mindful of how many events we are planning, when we are planning those events, and the cluttering of events. And also, I think we just need less events in general. If I was VP, I would advocate for greater collaboration within the commissions and really just try to make it more quality over quantity. And that's that on that.
Go ahead, Noah.
Thank you. So kind of to what I said before about adjusting the budgeting process to allow for more autonomy and input from commission members, I think it would be a great way, aside from the summer budget, but for the fall budget, having an expectation that commissioners and the commissions will kind of have an understanding of when their events will be. And at fall retreat, which I do think retreat is super important for planning these events and team building, kind of mapping out what we think the rest of the year should look like. And really, I really like sticky notes and big, large pieces of white paper. So I think we could map it out and and make sure that the paid events are separated well. And I think having that visual will be really important for it. And then also once we have them mapped out, we can kind of see like, oh, these ones are very similar. Maybe we can collaborate on them if that collaboration wasn't already occurring. And also another way to kind of alleviate that whole point of having events, if that's not possible, is different ways of communicating internally. I think Messenger is the worst thing ever. It's the devil. You miss so many messages. I log into it and I like everything's there. So I think we need to refigure how we're going to internally message, because if we're not being like strategic in terms of how we're communicating and making sure that we understand what's happening, we can't really expect any of our constituents to expect what's happening. So I think that would be, internal communication would be a big thing that I would work on, or if elected.
Also, just hopping in, no more 80 group chats, because there are too many group chats and they're ridiculously hard to follow. Slack. No one's advocating for Slack.
Danielle.
Hi. So, as VP this year, it was sort of my job to manage the Google Calendar on which all of the lit events are posted onto. And it's definitely difficult because even though I try to set timelines and deadlines for people to submit their events for, a lot of people would be late or forget to put them in or would input them in properly. And a lot of people, even if they put them in on the right time, they would also move around their events. So it was, as vice president, I found it was really hard to keep track, but I've sort of come up with some ways that I want to address this issue in the future. So one of them Noah stole from me, but it was during the budget meeting. During the budget meeting, having beside every event that people are budgeting for, having an estimated date that they want to put that event on. So obviously it doesn't have to be March 14th at 3 p.m. It could be like the third week of March that I want to have this event, just so then we all have an estimated time, especially because everyone has to submit their budgets in a timely manner. They would have to have these dates included on them for sure. Another thing I would like to have is a meeting with all the commissioners in January, because I find the reason why March is always so heavy is because Fireball and Reading Week are in February. So those are a giant chunk of time away from campus and then an entire weekend for Fireball. So having a meeting even in early January where we could sit down and we could accurately plan out when we want all these events to take place, and possible collaborations that could take place along the way, I think that would be pretty useful.
Great. Do we have any questions for the audience?
So first of all, Noah, I love your socks.
Okay.
So this question is kind of for all the candidates, and it was kind of touched, well, it was a good chunk of it was touched upon by a question that Paul asked already, but all three of you are running unopposed, and there are also two other commissioners who are running unopposed, and a lot, even just like with the contested positions, a lot of it is people who are already involved in the lit, including people who might have been deputies or are currently hold a role on council. So my question is, how tangibly will any of you reach out to UC students, connect them to the lit, and get them involved? Because like, it's always great to have experience, especially on the lit and especially for positions like these, but it's also important to have new faces in student politics. So how would you address that?
Yeah, well, like, just look at, like, me and Danielle. Me and Danielle have been on this, sorry, Noah. Me and Danielle have both been on this council since first year, but that's really, that's kind of how we view our engagement with students to this point. It's incoming first years, engage with them the best that we can, and then hope they'll stick around. But the issue is there, if that's our tactic every year there's second, third, fourth years who just feel like they're not being engaged, who feel like they're being left behind. The first years we engaged with the year before, who all of a sudden feel like, oh, I'm not really no one really cares anymore. That's a big issue. So we need to refocus on how we engage with students, the ways that we do, and look for viable options that we can communicate with them more directly, more personably, because just a newsletter in their email that they probably blocked already, and just, Facebook posts, like, that's only so much. We really need to connect with students in person. And as a council of 30 people, like, that should be a little more doable. That should be a little bit more realistic. I understand we have thousands of students in UC, but I feel like we can really find new solutions to address these issues.
Do you want to go?
I think
Okay.
Noah had his answer.
Thank you for the question. I think next. So I think a large part of it is people aren't engaged with the lit for a number of reasons. I think we need to get to the root cause of why that's happening. So I think really potentially being a survey, we send it to all UC students to try to understand what type of events they want to see or what type of services they want to see the UC Lit offer, because we're often like asking people what they want to see from their lit, but they're the people who are already involved, not the people who aren't involved. So I think we need to reach out to that community to really understand and get them engaged. But I think it also comes down to, while they are still a part of the lit in a sense, commission members are going to provide a really good role for people to get involved on those councils, similarly to how like different committees on the UTSU are open to all students. And I don't know if they still have them, but they used to have them. And people would then potentially run from that, not run away from it, they'll run for the position. But I think really making sure that the commissions are having commission meetings, and I'm guilty of it as well, and I will bring back commission meetings and committees next year if elected. But I think having regular commission meetings, they really kind of fell from the wayside this year, and that's a shame, because that's one of the main ways that we can get people involved in the planning process, and really those are the people who will then run for the lit. It's the main pool of them. So I think really having consistent commission meetings and making sure that they're communicated to students. I was looking through my email the other day, and the youngins won't remember, but Cyrus used to send emails to his commission members, or the people who signed up for the commission, and I saw them, and I would go, or people would go because they would get that reminder. I think Facebook is really bombarding people, especially the lit. Like the past few years, we post too much, and the commission meetings are less important, so they get less traction. And I think really trying different ways to communicate with students, specifically people who are involved in the lit and commissions, is really an important way to get more people to run. And also really just making sure more people have, even if it's a little touching point on like say finance, they have that experience to then say, hey, I feel like I could run, or I know that the lit is something that I can do. I think also just having more socials or things that lit members and commission members and deputies are a part of, because I feel like deputies and commission members often feel very far removed from the council, and that really shouldn't happen, because it's a society, not like people often say I'm on the lit. Everyone's a part of the lit. You're on the executive of it. I think we really need to move away from that terminology and that framing of it to get more people feeling like they are included.
Yeah, I agree. A lot of those points. I think the main thing that this question really holds is breaking through tradition. I think that's something that the lit has struggled with since 1854. It's something that's embedded in the institution. So how do we break through this tradition? Well, I think we saw a bit of that this year. I personally saw it through the post that Aiden and Paul made on the snow day. That got so much traction online from a huge number of UC students who, I was reading the comments, I was like, I don't know who all these people are, but they're like, love my UC, oh my gosh, it's the best college. I'm like, wow, look, we're doing something, and that's not to our normal audience. So I think we have to find more creative ways to engage with these people, and advocacy is just one way we could do that. I also am open to going to new spaces to meeting UC students, because we have 5,000 constituents, and we could do tabling at Sid Smith, I know Kiana did that this year with the Mental Wellness Commission, talking in classrooms as well. I know that's usually something that the course unions do, but I don't think anything would be wrong with if you're in a large class and we have a pub crawl coming up, you could always advertise that. I don't think if you're not UC, you could still buy a ticket. So I think branching out ways going into classrooms, I think that's also a smart way to get more students involved. I think specifically for first years, we need a breakout event after orientation to keep them interested in the UC Lit. During orientation, it's, oh my gosh, look, there's UC Lit there, there, clubs fair. But I feel like after orientation, once they start getting into school, that high really dies down and they forget about us. So I think we need a type of event that really brings back their memory. They're like, yeah, UC Lit, that's who they are. So I definitely think working with the co-chairs, that would be something cool that we could do. After Frosh, what? Yes, you. And then I know Thomas and Noah touched upon fourth years. Thomas and Noah touched on fourth years who just feel like they're not connected anymore. And I feel like we could definitely bring them back in with the fourth years who are still connected, working mainly with the upper year reps, saying, hey, what are your friends currently like interested in? Oh, they're just focusing on school. Well, we have this academic alumni event going on. Maybe they might be interested in that. So I think collaborating with the upper year reps specifically on how to get more engaged fourth years involved would be a great way in.
Okay,
I'll just add one more. Sorry, one last thing.
you're killing me.
I also just want to say I don't think we focus enough on resident students in first year. They often don't stay in residence after first year, so they're not involved with UCRC, but they don't feel like they're involved with the Lit because they weren't in first year because they were more involved with UCRC. So I think we need to steal people from UCRC to get them to join for the Lit. Work together and then steal them in second year when they move off campus would be a really good strategy for getting people who are actively engaged in UC but feel removed from the Lit after first year. So, yeah.
Okay, question from the audience. I think we'll take one more.
What was yours? It's like a second question. You can take his right after because this is probably a serious question. It's like a.
Mine's like an add-on to that conversation.
I want a question.
I have a
want
question.
fun
Okay, all right, Tyler, hit us with it.
So my question is for the vice presidential candidate. If elected as vice president, do you solemnly swear that you will ring the bell and before every council meeting?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I did it and nobody noticed.
Nobody
noticed.
It was really fun.
All right, Josh.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, wait, who are you?
My name is Joshua Benjamin Beanstalk. I was born on November 10th.
Joshua what?
Joshua Benjamin Beanstalk. I was born on November 10th,
love
1999 to Jewish and Italian parents in North Shore, Ontario. Yeah. So my question is about residents' involvement. It's like one of the biggest things that I've dealt with this year on the Lit. And I would like to keep helping to kind of aid a little bit going forward, whether I'm on the Lit or not on the Lit. And so my question for you is, what like tangible, actual things do you want to do to bridge the divide, the clear divide that we have between UCRC and the houses and the Lit? And where do we go go forward to better our relationships so we can communicate better with each other and in turn create a better calendar schedule and more efficient, like everything?
I just want to remind candidates we are past 7, so just keep your
Last
answers
question.
briefer. Not last question.
Second last question.
Third last.
I could talk on that then. Tangible things. Okay. So, so one thing is revitalizing our constitution and working with them to look at their constitution. So then both documents say the same thing about how the UCRC and UC Lit interact, because I heard from a lot of UCRC execs that their part on the UC Lit is very tiny, where ours is a bit bigger, and they both include different things. So I think we need to establish how our relationship looks, how it plays out throughout the year, and who needs to be communicating with who.
Mhm.
I would like to work with UCRC and SCC again to work on a residence rep UCRC liaison type position. I think that the conversations we had back in January at our AGM were very valuable, and I think that something can definitely come from that conversation. So I'm hoping to work closely with the UCRC president and vice president and the House exec to make sure that we can figure out a way to establish a very direct relationship with those who live on residence. One thing I would like to do at least a few times a year is have meetings just with core exec and the House exec. I think that there's often a divide where it's like, they're just UCRC's domain, but I think that we could have meetings with them, and I think that would be a really good opportunity to show some of our events, get them more involved. Maybe they find out about a commission for one of our talks. But I think doing that every few months, just doing a general check-in with the House execs would be a really good opportunity to get to know them a bit better.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to raise your hand. Go
Okay.
ahead.
Yeah, I would just like to build off of Danielle's point, but I really think it would be important for the lit core exec, or some of them, to go to the UCRC meetings, even though they're at an ungodly hour.
8 o'clock now.
Oh, that's better. And I would like to do that, and I think it would also be great if like the core exec of UCRC and the core exec of the lit could like have regular scheduled meetings, similar to how the core exec meets with Naeem on a regular basis, which I think would be great to have that regular meeting. I also think that I would like to build on the point where having that communication, but I just don't think that Riri was an effective way. Like I think we all know that Riri wasn't effective. I think we can just move past that and try to build a new way. But I think if we have like an open dialogue about what we want to see for communication and how we can do that, I don't think it's going to come from just somebody coming up with an idea. I think it's going to have to be us sitting down and saying what we want to see from it and how we can potentially get there to kind of develop this new communication strategy. But maybe we can do that in the summer or September if elected.
And another issue that's also there is like res students especially are in a very particular spot, because not only are there the UC Lit events, the UCRC events, and the Dawn events, there's also, you're in your first year of university, and that's a huge undertaking in itself. And so with events coming from 3 different sources, all of which are completely uncoordinated with each other, and you have your Math 135 midterm next Friday, you don't want to go to any of them because it's just overwhelming. That's why I think through collaboration with both, not just UCRC, but also the Dawns, and really just focusing on coordination of all the sources of events and activities, that would really be the most effective way to really hone in on engagement with our first year resident students.
Okay. I'm going to cut you off this time.
So student life. Student life has so much involvement with CRC and like Dawn related things that I think we should communicate with them that they should also work with BUC Lit to also kind of. I just
tripartite committee.
All right, we're gonna move on
exactly.
to the next thing. Second last question, and maybe second most important question. What you've all been, as we talked about before, on council for a while. What's something you've done that you would do differently or that you regret?
Oh, my entire year as mental health commissioner.
Oh.
Big mess. Anyone who saw that, huge mess. Mainly anxiety, a lot of sad. Whatever. But listen, I found my place on council. I found how the best way for me as a person to work with council, to be a representative for the students, and also a renewable Zoloft prescription. So I'm doing great. So I think just outed myself here. So I think it's just, you're always going to fail. I failed so hard as mental health commissioner, but I took a step back. I pulled myself up. I was like, Thomas, you dumb bitch, get it together. And here we are today, and I'm running for VP. That could be you. Don't let your failures bring you down.
Okay, try following
Oh,
that
fun.
up.
That was pretty inspirational.
Danielle, do you want to go?
Oh.
Okay,
I
Danielle,
think
just
it's
go,
raising your
please.
hand.
I'm begging.
You just.
Okay, one thing that I think I failed at this year was keeping up with one-on-one meetings with council members. They were very difficult to organize if you had to fill out the doodle poll and then, wait, no, somebody couldn't make it, so you had to rearrange the doodle poll. It's okay. But I think once it failed the first time, I just sort of gave up, and I shouldn't have. I should have really kept on top of having those one-on-one meetings and keeping them very regular. I plan to improve that this year by starting right in the summer. So May 1st, expect an email for one-on-one if I'm elected. So, and then making sure that I do this every few months. And I also want to break that up with each core exec member. So I would take 6, you would take 6, you would take 14. How does that add up? I don't know math. Sorry. But splitting it up to then all works out.
6, did you just say 6 is 20?
No, I should say 6:14.
All right, Noah, take it away.
Sorry. So the biggest is it regret or how'd you phrase it?
What's one thing you would change or that you regret?
So I think at the beginning of the year, I would agree with the one-on-ones, but I think also setting expectations with ancillaries, most specifically Diablos and orientation. I think because some of these positions are hired by the previous core exec, there's this lull period where the new core exec is trying to figure out what the fuck to do and what the positions are and how things operate. And those people get left to the wayside. And then they kind of do their own thing, and then you regroup and you're like, wow, we were supposed to be doing this and this didn't happen. So I think really sitting down and setting expectations with those different groups, the ancillaries, and also internally is really super important. And I think also preparing future core exec as soon as they're elected to have communication with different ancillaries and groups that are elected, because I think that we often forget about our ancillaries way too much. So that would be what I would do. And also changing the sign over from the bank early on, because it's a really annoying process.
What?
Doing the changeover of the bank accounts earlier on, because it's a really long process and super annoying and nobody cares. So.
I only did that because you do that a lot.
Okay,
Sorry.
so, all right, this one, you can take a sec to think about it because it's a little more difficult. Shrek 1, Shrek 2, Shrek 3, Shrek 4, or
Shrek
Chicken
2, Shrek 2.
Chicken Run.
Shrek 2, because of the fairy godmother's performance.
Okay,
It's
Shrek 2.
revolutionary.
Correct.
What about the full Halloween?
Hold on. This is still a
What about the
debate.
Halloween
This is
special?
still a debate.
Exactly.
I want
Okay,
to hear what the
Shrek 2.
constituents have to say.
Danielle, or
The Shrek episode where the ghost of Lord Farquaad comes back.
respectable?
I'm actually going with an alternative option. On the Shrek 2 DVD and the extras, you can play Far, Far Away Idol.
Yeah.
And literally, it's the most iconic thing of all time.
Yeah.
And that's that on that.
Yeah.
I also just want to say that in Shrek 2, when Shrek turns into a human, I thought he was very attractive. And I think that's when I realized I was gay.
We need to leave. Are we done?
Yeah, we're done. All right.
I have
Here.
one more question.
Hey, look, everyone. Oh.
Hey. So this is mostly directed at Noah, but Thomas, feel free to answer as well. So as gay men, we understand the fact that we can't count. So I'm wondering how you, particularly as finance commissioner, would balance that.
We're done here.
No,
Well,
let's
honestly,
not do that actually.
You really
So I